Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone. Today we will learn Chapter 5 Cellular Respiration and Fermentation. Subtopic 5.1 Aerobic Respiration, 5.2 Fermentation and its application. This chapter will cover 7 marks during UPS2 and 15 marks during PSPM. In this video lecture, we will only cover 5.1 Aerobic Respiration, learning outcomes, state the needs for energy and the role of respiration, outline the complete oxidation of glucose, and describe Link reaction. Definition of cellular respiration. A process occurs in cells that break down complex organic molecules into simple molecules, and it is a catabolic reaction. It is used to produce ATP and involving redox reaction. So this is the equation for cellular respiration, where there is the oxidation of glucose to CO2 and reduction of oxygen to H2O. So this is what is meant by oxidation and what is reduction. Therefore, cellular respiration involving redox reaction. So what is the needs of energy produced during cellular respiration? The first one is for active transport. Second, for the movement, for example, muscle contraction, for reproduction and growth, and it is also used for excretion. So what is the main roles of cellular respiration? To produce energy required by living organism in form of ATP. And also energy in form of heat energy. So let's take a look at the structure of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It is a nucleotide with unstable phosphate bond, which consists of ribose sugar, nitrogenous base, which is adenine, and 3-phosphate group. Each phosphate bond contains high energy, especially the third group. So when organism needs energy, ATP will be hydrolyzed. And this is the equation. ATP plus H2O will become into ADP plus inorganic phosphate plus energy is released. So this is the energy release for cell metabolism. ATP also can be resynthesized from an ADP. The process is called as phosphorylation of ADP. And this is the equation: ADP plus inorganic phosphate plus energy released from cellular respiration and become into ATP plus H2O. Two types of cellular respiration: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen, while anaerobic respiration does not require oxygen. For this video lecture, we will focus on aerobic respiration. Definition: a process by which glucose is completely break down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy in form of ATP in the presence of oxygen. So this is the equation. Glucose plus 6 oxygen will become into 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water and ATP. From this equation, we can see that aerobic respiration is a redox reaction. Aerobic respiration involves 3 metabolic stages. The first stage is called as glycolysis, produce 2 ATP. Second stage, Krebs cycle, produce 2 ATP. And the third stage is oxidative phosphorylation, 34 ATP will be produced. So in total, there are 38 ATP will be produced for aerobic respiration of one molecule of glucose. Just now we know that aerobic respiration will produce ATP. So how the ATP will be produced? It can be produced by substrate level phosphorylation or by oxidative phosphorylation. So during substrate level phosphorylation, an enzyme will transfer a phosphate from substrate into ADP, and the ADP will become into ATP. Usually, this kind of ATP will be generated during glycolysis and Krebs cycle, and only small amount of ATP will be produced in this way. However, in oxidative phosphorylation, the ATP is generated during electron transport chain or ETC and chemiosmosis. It accounts for most of the ATP synthesis, so it produces large amount of ATP. Okay, let's take a look at the first stage in aerobic respiration, glycolysis. The definition: splitting of one molecule of glucose, 6 carbon, into 2 molecules of pyruvate, 3 carbon, through a series of reactions catalyzed by specific enzyme. This is the basic diagram. Glucose will be break down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. And during this reaction, 2 ATP will be produced. Also, 2 NADH plus 2H plus. Glycolysis can occur either in presence or absence of oxygen. It is occur in cytosol or cytoplasm of cell. And again, this is the products of glycolysis from one molecule of glucose. Okay, let's overview steps involved in glycolysis. There are 2 phases involved. The first phase is energy investment phase. During energy investment phase, there are 5 steps involved. It is called as energy investment phase because during this phase, the ATP will be used. 2 enzymes that you must memorize in this phase is hexokinase and phosphofructokinase. Hexokinase is used during step 1, where it catalyzes the phosphorylation of glucose into glucose 6-phosphate. During this reaction, ATP will be used. And phosphofructokinase catalyzes the phosphorylation of fructose 6-phosphate into fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. And this is occurred during step 3. The ATP also will be used during this step. The details of the steps in energy investment phase will be covered during tutorial class. The second phase is energy payoff phase. In this phase, it involves another 5 steps. This phase is called as energy payoff phase because during this phase, ATP is formed. The ATP is formed during step 7 and also during step 10. During step 7, 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate will transfer its phosphate into ADP, and ADP will become into ATP. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate will become into 3-phosphoglycerate. So during step 7, 2 ATP will be produced. In step 10, phosphoenol pyruvate will transfer its phosphate to ADP and become into ATP. Phosphoenol pyruvate will become into pyruvate. 2 ATP will be produced during step 10. This kind of ATP production is called as substrate level phosphorylation. Other than ATP, during this phase, there is also the production of 2 NADH plus 2H plus during step 6. So in total, the amount of ATP produced is 4 ATP. However, the net amount of ATP is only 2 ATP because another 2 ATP has been used during energy investment phase. The detail of each step in this phase will be discussed during tutorial class. After glycolysis is complete, it is proceed with link reaction, which is occur in matrix of mitochondrion. In this reaction, pyruvate is converted into acetyl-CoA, or also known as acetyl coenzyme A. It involves 3 steps. The first step is decarboxylation of pyruvate, where CO2 is released and forming into 2 carbon fragments. Second step is oxidation. The 2 carbon fragment is oxidized, release its electron to NAD+, and NAD+ is reduced into NADH plus H+. The third step is addition of coenzyme A. Coenzyme A is added to 2-carbon acetate, forming acetyl coenzyme A, which then enters into Krebs cycle. So what is the product of link reaction? So for 1 molecule of glucose that enter glycolysis, it will produce into 2 pyruvate. So the 2 pyruvate will enter link reaction, producing 2 acetyl coenzyme A, 2 NADH plus 2H plus, and release 2 CO2. Second stage in aerobic respiration, Krebs cycle. Definition: series of chemical reactions in aerobic respiration in which acetyl coenzyme A is completely degraded to carbon dioxide and water with the release of metabolic energy that is used to produce ATP. The location is in matrix of mitochondria. This diagram shows that Krebs cycle involves 8 steps. The products of Krebs cycle from 1 molecule of glucose, which involving 2 turns of Krebs cycle. First is 2 ATP. Next, 6 NADH plus 6H plus, 2 FADH2, and 4 CO2 is released. Why there is 2 turns of Krebs cycle? Because for 1 molecule of glucose, it will produce into 2 acetyl-CoA during link reaction. So for 1 acetyl-CoA, it involves 1 cycle. If 2 acetyl-CoA, it involves 2 turns of Krebs cycle. That is why all the product is multiplied by 2. So let's recap the 3 stages of aerobic respiration. The first stage is glycolysis, which occurs in cytosol, producing 2 ATP by substrate level phosphorylation and also producing 2 NADH plus 2H plus. Second stage is Krebs cycle, occur in matrix of mitochondria, producing 2 ATP by substrate level phosphorylation and also produce 6 NADH plus 6H plus and 2 FADH2. The third stage is oxidative phosphorylation, where it produces the most of the ATP, which is 34 ATP. We will discuss this reaction after this. Third stage of aerobic respiration, oxidative phosphorylation. Definition: formation of ATP by using energy derived from the redox reactions of electron transport chain, ETC. It occurs in inner membrane of mitochondria, including cristae, and also in thylakoid membrane of chloroplast. What is electron transport chain? Definition: series of electron carrier molecules embedded in inner membrane of mitochondria that carry electrons from NADH and FADH2 through series of redox reaction to synthesize ATP. And this diagram shows that in inner membrane of mitochondria, this is the electron carrier molecule that embedded NADH and FADH2 that is produced during glycolysis, Link reaction, and Krebs cycle will transfer its electron to this electron carrier. During transferring of electron, the redox reactions is occur and it is used to synthesize ATP by oxidative phosphorylation. The ETC is completed, it is followed by chemiosmosis. Definition: the movement of hydrogen ion H+ from high H+ concentration to low H+ concentration through ATP synthase to catalyze the synthesis of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. This diagram shows that ATP synthase, the purple color, is embedded in inner membrane of mitochondria. It involves in catalyze the formation of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. The details of ETC and chemiosmosis will be discussed during tutorial class. So during chemiosmosis, for each glucose molecule that enters cellular respiration, it will produce up to 34 ATP molecules through oxidative phosphorylation in active cells. So this is the diagram where after ETC, electron transport chain, it is followed by chemiosmosis here. So during chemiosmosis, there is a diffusion of H+ from high concentration region to low concentration region through ATP synthase. And ATP synthase will catalyze the formation of ATP. Total amount of ATP will be produced in this way, which is oxidative phosphorylation, is 34 ATP in active cells. So let's summarize the amount of ATP production by oxidative phosphorylation in active cells. During glycolysis, 2 NADH plus 2H plus will be produced and each NADH producing 3 ATP. So total 6 ATP is formed. Next, during Link reaction, there is 2 NADH plus 2H plus produced and each produce 3 ATP. So total 6 ATP will be formed. During Krebs cycle, 6 NADH plus 6H plus is produced and each produce 3 ATP. So total 18 ATP will be formed. Other than that, Krebs cycle also produce 2 FADH2 and each FADH2 will produce 2 ATP. So total 4 ATP will be formed by oxidative phosphorylation. The total number of ATP produced in active cell by oxidative phosphorylation is 34 ATP. So the grand total amount of ATP production in active cells by substrate level phosphorylation, glycolysis will produce 2 ATP. Krebs cycle also produce 2 ATP. By oxidative phosphorylation, 6 ATP will be produced from NADH plus H plus produced in glycolysis. 6 ATP will be formed from NADH plus H plus produced in Link reaction. 18 ATP produced from NADH plus H plus produced in Krebs cycle, and 4 ATP will be produced from FADH2 produced in Krebs cycle. So the grand total number of ATP is 38 ATP will be produced from one molecule of glucose that undergo aerobic respiration in active cells. Okay, that's all our video lecture for 5.1 aerobic respiration. I hope you can understand stages involved in aerobic respiration and the ATP produced during aerobic respiration. So let's check your understanding. I have prepared for you a few exercises for subtopic 5.1.